All right, so to navigate through the web client, on this particular one, you can use any web browser that's available. But for our purposes of demonstration, we're going to go ahead and use Internet Explorer. And within the application, you'll see at the very top, we have our navigation bar. And on that navigation bar, you'll see that we have our application, our general application of Dynamics 365 that will show all the applications that we have available to us. If I click on it a second time, you'll see that it will disappear. Then next to that, we have our business application selectors. So as far as the different business applications that we have available to us, we can click on the various business applications. And within each business application, you'll see that it gives us separate commands or different actions and different entities that are available within that business application. So you'll see when I click on sales, I can have my accounts and contacts, leads, opportunities, competitors. All of these are considered the different entities. Same thing if I go to service. Again, I have my accounts and contacts, but then I also have my cases, service calendar, queues, my articles, service, products, and then of course for marketing, we have our marketing lists and our campaigns and our quick campaigns. So once I go through, and again, I choose the business application that I want to work in, and from that section, so say for example, I want to go in and look at my accounts, I can click the entity, and from there, that will then take me to the view to show all the records for that entity that I selected. Now, we'll talk about views in a little bit more detail a little later on in the actual lesson. But for now, just to kind of show you that we have the views and they're available out there. Now, the other thing is that you'll see that as I click on that entity, that the system and the navigation bar will show me exactly where I am, and that I can very easily be able to go through and navigate to another entity by clicking on the drop down arrow next to that business application. You'll also see that when I'm selected that particular entity and I look at the views, I also have a drop down arrow next to that entity. When I click on that, you'll see it shows all of the recent records that I've actually opened for that specific entity. Now, the other thing that you'll also see is if I go ahead and just click back and I navigate over to the right-hand side, there's a search icon, and we'll discuss that in just a second. But next to that search icon, there's another icon there for recently viewed items. Just know that the difference between the drop-down arrow that we have next to the entity and the recently viewed items is when I click on the drop-down arrow next to the entity, such as accounts, I'm only looking at those records that I've accessed for that entity, which is the accounts. Whereas when I click on the recently viewed items, it allows me to see all of the items as well as views that I've accessed recently. So I'm not limited to just that entity. So you'll see I actually have my certain dashboards, I've been in certain cases, I've even opened up as far as different emails. So I can look at, and you'll see if I continue to scroll down, that I'm not limited to just the records of that entity. So if I want to very quickly and easily go back to that record, I can do so. And then I can do the same thing for my recent views. And you'll notice that as I hover over that recent view, I actually have the ability to pin it so that anytime I want to be able to go back, because the recent views are going to change as you continue to navigate through the system. But if this is a view that I always want to be able to quickly and easily access, I can pin it so that every time I go to my recent views, it's going to be the first one that's available, and I can very quickly and easily access that view as necessary. All right, now as we talked about, on the left-hand side of the recently viewed icons, we also have a global search icon. So on this particular one, when I click on the global search icon, you'll see it gives me the ability to search within the entire Dynamics 365 environment. So let's say I just type in Office 365, press my Enter key, and that you'll see that when it returns, it now uses what they call this relevance search. And as I look at this, you'll see that within the entire application, it will go through and find not only just the products, but even opportunities emails, quotes, invoices, orders that refer to or reference Office 365. So it allows you to go through, and when you're performing that search, you'll see that you can perform the search either being the relevance search or even a categorized search. And just taking a look at this, you'll notice as far as when I do a categorized search, I can now do it based on activities versus products. So it makes it a little bit easier when I'm searching that information. And then over my filter, you'll see I can then filter it down even further. And we'll discuss this in a little bit more later on in this lesson, but just to give you an idea about how to be able to use that global search functionality, that is what the little magnifying glass will do up in our navigation bar. Now, the other option that you'll see within your navigation bar, again on the right-hand side, is the new icon or the plus icon. This is for our quick create feature. So when I click on that, you'll see it gives me the option to be able to quickly create certain record types or activities. So you'll see I have the options for activities. And then when it comes to different record types, so say for example, that I want to be able to go through and create a new contact. You'll see that when I choose the record type that I want to create, I now will have a form appear, and it gives me just the key information that we should use to be able to create that contact record. So on this particular one, let's say we'll do Chris Berry. And then again, from here, I can fill out the other related information that I want to be able to have for this particular contact record. Once I fill this out, you'll see that I can very quickly and easily click the save icon. And once I click the save icon, it will now allow me to create that record. So I don't necessarily have to do a lot of clicking around in the application to be able to add accounts, contacts, cases, opportunities, or any of the common record types that you'll see within the Dynamics 365 application. And then next to, as far as the quick create feature, we also have the advanced find feature. Now the advanced find feature, we'll talk about this at a very, very high level as we discuss this throughout the lesson and other courses, is it's the ability to be able to find information using advanced query type of functionalities. So from here, you can go in. So for example, if we're wanting to search for all of my accounts that happen to be located in Washington or Texas, I can use the advanced find feature just to narrow down the selection of records that I want to be able to look through, and then be able to build possibly dashboards, reports, or views off of this advanced find feature. Now again, we're not going to go into detail about using the functionality of advanced find right now, but you'll see that it is simply available within the entire system. So regardless of where you are, regardless of what entity that you're in or what record that you're on, you have the ability of using the advanced find tool. And then you'll see next to the advanced find tool, we also have our personal settings. And with the personal settings, when I click on it, you'll see that I have the ability of looking at my personal options, being able to download the apps for Dynamics 365 for Outlook. If I want to see the welcome screen, find out what version of Dynamics 365 that I'm on. And as we discussed previously, the ability to opt in or opt out of the learning path functionality from our help feature. Now, the other thing as far as going through and looking at more details, say I'm going to go back to my accounts, and you'll see that very quickly and easily to be able to navigate through the system, that if I want to be able to go back to one of the windows that I was looking at before, my navigation bar has what they call breadcrumbs. So it gives me the ability to, so if I now want to just go back to sales, I click on sales, and you'll see it takes me back to my main homepage for sales. So as I go through, and again, I'm going to click on accounts, and we're in our active accounts, I could be able to go through and be able to navigate back and forth, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. But the other thing to point out is not only do we have our navigation bar, but we also have a command bar, which has actions that are available to take against the records that we're looking at in a view. And we'll discuss views a little bit later on in the lesson, but essentially what your views just allow you to do is to look at some of the records related to that entity type. And not only that, but with the command bar, you'll see that you have different types of actions that you can perform against one or several records. And depending on how many records that you select, you'll notice that the actions available will change depending on whether you have no records selected or multiple records selected. Additionally, from that command bar, not only do I have the actions, but you'll notice over on the right-hand side, I actually have what they call the More Commands or the ellipse button or the ellipse icon. When I click on that ellipse icon, you'll see that there are additional commands that may have not been able to fit on the entire command bar based on your resolution or display settings. So anytime that if you want to see if there's additional commands that are available, I can click on the ellipse icon and be able to see other options that are available that may not fit on the command bar itself. So going through and just taking a look as we talked about with the breadcrumbs. So if I go through and let's say I'm going to open up one of these account records. So I'm going to click on the link. So when I click on the link to open up the account record, up in the command bar or up in the title, up in the navigation bar as we talked about, is that you'll see I now have a breadcrumb of being able to show what account that I'm in, what entity I'm in, what business application that I'm currently in. And then one of the things I can also do is you'll notice that next to the actual account name for Coho Winery, that there's also a drop down arrow that's available to me. And that when I click on that drop down arrow, you'll see that it shows me all the different record types that are also potentially associated with that account. So right from the account, I can go in and see if they have any entitlements set up for my service module. I can go in and see as far as any opportunities, cases, or marketing lists. If there's any associated documents or contacts or activities that are linked to that account record. And then the other thing I can also do is when we're talking about the form itself. So you'll see that even within the account form, I also have a command bar. And within that command bar, again, I have more commands with certain functionality that I can perform or certain actions that I can perform against this account record. But also within the form itself is that we have these forms that are going to be available for all the different record types within the Dynamics 365 environment. So just kind of going through and taking a look at the form and how the form is set up, you'll see that next to the account name that we have an icon here, and that what that icon will do is what they call the tab selector. And what it allows me to do is I can go through and I can easily navigate to the different tabs that are set up on the form. Now, when it comes to the account form, we might not necessarily have a lot of tabs, and I can scroll down and I can look at all the details for this form. And even so, you'll see that there's a lot of information that we can put on the form. And this, for the account form, is not that long. But when we look at some of the other forms, such as cases, they might have multiple tabs. So what the tab selectors allows me to do is instead of having to scroll all the way down to the details section, I can simply just click details, and you'll now see that it navigates me down to that portion of the form. And then if I want to go back up, I can click on the tab selector and go back up to my summary form. You'll also see that within the form itself, one of the other options that you have is both the relationship assistant as well as the interactive wall. And we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later on the lesson, but you'll see with the interactive wall, I can see a lot of details about this particular account. And aside from that, we talked about as far as our tabs, you'll also see on the upper left-hand side that it has the tab name. And even with the tab names, I have the ability to collapse and expand those tabs. So if I just want to focus on the detailed section of my form, I can expand the detail section, make sure I have all of the fields that I want to complete for this particular account, and then collapse it again. I can do the same thing for summary. so that as I'm going through, if I want to be able to focus on certain areas and not have the form look so busy, I can quickly and easily expand and collapse each one of these tabs. Now, a couple of the other things that you'll see that you have available on the form itself, and again, with regardless of the record types that we're dealing with, whether it's a case, whether it's an account, an opportunity, even an article, the form layout's going to be similar in the sense that you might have tabs, you might actually have sections, and then many of the main record types, such as cases, opportunities, leads, accounts, contacts, are even going to have the interactive wall. And you'll also see up at the top, you'll even have a header section that might provide additional details regarding that record. But on the form itself, you actually can have different sections. So for example, over on the left-hand side, you'll see I have the main section for my account information and my address information. Over on the right-hand side, I have additional details regarding my primary contact. But then as we briefly discussed when we talked about is setting up the relationships and understanding the relationships in a previous lesson, you'll also see that we have what they call our subgrids. The subgrids allows you, this is where we can link or show the association between an account and other record types in the system. So you'll see as I can scroll down, I can see if we have what accounts that we have associated to that, what contacts we have associated to that account, any recent opportunities, as well as recent cases. And you'll notice next to each one of those subgrids that I have a plus sign as well as a little table sign. So what this allows me to do is, again, directly within that record, whether it be an account, a contact, depending on where we are and what we need to be able to do, is it gives me the ability to add a new contact. So it's very similar to using the Quick Create functionality in that when I click on the Add Contact icon, you'll now see it pulls up the Quick Create form just as what we had before and allows me to create a contact directly associated to the account that we have within the account form. So I can add a new contact, and then you'll see that once I save the record, not only does it allow me to save the record, but it now has that contact associated to that account. And the same could be true for opportunities and even cases and even entitlements if we have any of those configured for that particular account that we have. Now, the other thing that as we were talking about is that you'll see is next to the ability to add a contact record, we also have the ability to look at what they call the associated view. So when I click on the associated view icon, you'll see that what that will do is it now opens up, I'm still in my account form, but I can now look at and focus on the contacts related to this particular account. And then you'll also see that I have a command bar where I can take certain actions against those contact records. So I can link an existing contact, or I can even add a new contact if I want to delete some of them or run reports or export the information. I have that available all still within my account record. Now, that being said, this is where sometimes it can get a little confusing in that, well, that's fine, but now how do I get back to my main account form? Because I'm now done looking at this, but I now just want to go back to where I was before. Well, there's two ways that you can do this. One of the ways that you can do this, as we talked about previously, you'll see in the navigation bar is that we do still have the ability to step back. So we can use simply our back function within our web browser, or I can go through and click on the account form to go back to our main account form. Now, since we are talking about the different icons that we have over on the left or the right-hand side of our command bar, you'll see that you have an up icon and a down icon. And what that will allow me to do is when I click on the down arrow, it allows me to go through and now look at the next record that I have in that view. So it does not matter if we're just dealing with accounts, contacts, opportunities, the functionality is going to be the same, that when I'm in that form, I can now go in and look at the individual record, and then navigate back and forth as necessary. And then next to the down arrow, you'll see that there's another icon called the pop-out icon. What this allows me to do is actually take that particular form and open it up in a separate window. So what we're dealing with is up to prior versions of the Microsoft Dynamics 365 environment. It used to be that every time that when we clicked on an account, it would open up a separate window. But starting in one of the previous versions of Dynamics CRM, they had it to where it would actually stay within the same web page. But we still have the ability to pop out and open up separate pages. So if I want to be able to have multiple accounts next to each other or compare information for two different records, I can do so by using that pop-out icon. And again, you'll see that that's going to be available not just when we're dealing with the forms, but as we go and we start talking about some of the other functionalities, you'll see some of these icons are going to show up again when we're dealing with forms throughout the system. And then as we just talked about previously, that if I'm done with this particular form and I want to be able to close it to go back to my active accounts list, again, we have a couple ways of doing so. I can go through, and again, by using my breadcrumbs, I can simply click on accounts and be able to see my active account list. Or if I want to be able to close the form and make sure that everything is going to be closed for me, I can click on the close icon, and you'll now see that I actually had multiple records open as I was navigating back and forth. And it now takes me back to my active accounts. And again, as we mentioned previously, we'll talk about utilizing and how to use these different views and some of the functionalities that we have available within those views in an upcoming lesson. But for now, we just have general abilities to be able to navigate within the system. It's more or less working with being able to work with typical web pages in that I can simply click on the hyperlinks to launch particular forms. I have a command bar that allows me to perform certain actions. And then anything I have available in my navigation bar as a reminder, I can utilize anytime, regardless of where I am in the system, to be able to perform those functions.